Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another week or bi-week or whatever you want to call it of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters, and today is June 18th, 2024. So 6/18/24, all nice multiples of six. Speaking as the math geek. Actually, speaking of math geek, might as well just speak a little personal here. So, I teach in the Harvard Summer School, and this has been this kind of weird period in between the end of the extension school spring semester and commencing the summer school, which begins this coming Monday. So there'll be a lot more people around Harvard Square and whatever as a lot of the summer school crowds start to arrive at the end of this week. And I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, when I'm outside of the classroom, I'm like a fish out of water. So I got 91 students registered as of today. It kind of fluctuates a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to that. Harvard Summer School, I have to tell you, is one of the most delightful experiences on earth because you have students from all over the world. And in my courses, at least, I'll have a mix of regular Harvard College students and some really, really bright high school students who come from all over the place. And some of them are online, but probably about half or more are going to be in class, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's just a great thing. Now, speaking of great things, we just this is sort of the part of the year where there's like festivals and events and just a lot of fun things going around town. So I'll just want to mention that the Cambridge River Festival was this past Saturday. And it was great. It's always great, but the weather gods were definitely with the Cambridge Arts Council and putting it together. It was not a cloud in the sky, and it was wonderful. I mean, it's not only because there's like I don't know what, three, four, at least four stages of different kinds of music, world music. My friend and neighbor Larry Ward, was involved with the Cambridge Jazz Festival, which is also coming up in late July. But they had a stage there with a lot of good jazz music. It was dance performances, jazz music, you name it, it's really there. And I got to say, when you lived in Cambridge for a long time, as I have, it's also a tremendous opportunity to run into friends. So you can't walk 50 feet and you go, hey, Norma, how you doing? Or, hey, Ron, how you doing? And it's just been it was great. One of the things I thought I might mention, though, and I think I'll actually use the share screen here just to highlight a few things that are coming up right away. As I say, we just come off the River Festival, which was really great. Now, tomorrow is the I guess the country's newest national holiday, which is Juneteenth, which is the commemoration of the day when the last holdout place in the United States was informed of emancipation in Galveston, Texas, in June 19th of 1865. So there's a parade starting at Cambridge City Hall. The whole festivities actually go from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. So this is right midweek. It's a holiday, a national holiday, actually. So if you want to come around by City Hall around 10 o'clock, ends up down at Riverside Press Park, and it should be a lot of fun for everybody. Maybe a little less spectacular, but I think just as interesting. On Thursday, there's the Cambridge Public Library is hosting the second annual spelling bee finals. So if you want to see some really, really bright youngins in some of the grade school grades, I guess really we're talking about pretty young here, grades 1 through 5. I guess really, anyway, it's happening at the lecture hall of the main library this Thursday, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. If you want to really cheer on some of the youngins, I think that'd be kind of fun. Another thing is coming up this Saturday on June 22nd is Fresh Pond Day. Now, I always enjoy going there for much of the same reasons that I like going to the River Festivals. I always run into friends. And by friends, for me, that includes a lot of people who work for the city in various city departments. Like at the Riverfest, I spend time with people who work in the stormwater management part of the city, and so some of the recycling and solid waste management people, where we go back a long, long way. But I was on a water and sewer advisory committee back in the 1980s, if you can believe it. Um, and back then, I remember suggesting, you people really ought to get the word out a little bit more. And they actually hosted a really small scale thing in the old treatment plant, where honestly it wasn't great, really spectacular. If you wanted to learn about backflow prevention devices and such like that, it was good, but not very well attended. But over the years, they opened it up and they've turned it into a really, really nice community event. So that's this Saturday, 11 to 3, up at Fresh Pond. Bring the kids. It's definitely, there's a lot of orientation toward the kids, but you can also learn a lot about Cambridge water. And I think that's always a worthwhile thing to do. Now, I don't have the fancy graphics or anything like that for these other ones, but I also think it's worth mentioning that before the month is through, there's a couple of other pretty big events. On Friday, June 28th, so 10 days from now, is the annual Citywide Dance Party, which used to be Mary Ellen from the manager's office kind of ran the show. But I think the Central Square Business Improvement District worked with Matt Nelson and others out of the manager's office. And I think they put on a great event last year. Over in Temple Street, there was a lot of focus for kids, which more and more should be the case in anything having to do with Central Square, in my humble opinion. And anyway, it's coming up Friday, June 28th in the evening. I couldn't tell you exactly what time it starts, but it goes on till I think about 11 o'clock or something. And it's actually pretty hilarious. It's pretty loud too, but it's good. So looking for that. And in a kind of a mixed feeling sort of announcement, there's Starlight Square is having a very, very abbreviated season this year, where they were and it comes to a close, not just for the season, but forever, or at least this incarnation of Starlight Square at Parking Lot 5 over at Norfolk and Bishop Allen. To close it out, they're having an event called on Sunday, June 30th, which is the very last day of June. And then they'll start disassembling things the following day. But from 2 to 5, it's called a Starlight Lovefest, which honestly, I think of so many of the people who have been involved in putting it together and have been actively involved in this from the very, very beginning, including a lot of the people affiliated with the Central Square BID, the Business Improvement District. They should be there. And I kind of hope to see other people who are really pivotal in helping it make it happen, like Louis DiPasquale. I hope he'll be there. But really ought to be just fine, and they generally take care of everybody. So this is the last day. I mean, there'll be other events in Central Square. Hopefully they'll revive the idea, the old tradition of the Central Square World's Fair that we used to do, 10, 20 years ago or more. And I think you'll just see generally some more sort of scattered site events happening in and around the square is sort of the new norm. But hopefully down the road, perhaps when the city works out its Central Square lots study and rezoning and all this stuff, maybe in some manner or other, we will have a recreation of Starlight Square 2.0, which may be in the same location or maybe not. But I think Starlight has kind of proven that there's some value in having a venue, that's hopefully principally free, just open to everybody. But something where people can really gather for well orchestrated events. So anyway, so last day is June 30th, and I'll be there. I'm definitely looking forward to that. So again, that's on a Sunday. So anyway, so that's sort of in the area of upcoming events. I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention some other things happening in the wider world, like the fact that it's bloody hot out today, tomorrow, and the next day. So everybody's just trying to beat the heat in whatever way they can. certainly the biggest news in the Boston area was the fact that, though it took an extra game, the Boston Celtics won their 18th World Championship last night, and it was really a fabulous display of some absolutely incredible basketball players. And personally, I tend to follow baseball a little bit more than I do basketball, but pound for pound, you really can't beat a championship level basketball final, a championship game. And as we say, as the old expression goes, no flies on the Dallas Mavericks. I think they were a magnificently good team as well. It's just we were a really special team this year, and it was great. Sometimes I get nervous. I actually turn the TV off because I don't want it to get, if it gets too close or starts to look like it's going to go the other way, I sort of want to leave the room. I think that's called the Bill Buckner effect. It's like I can't watch. But anyway, it worked out for the best. And I honestly, I can't say enough about what a really, really good event that was to see. So now I just want to pivot a little bit here and talk a little bit on the civic side. It's actually one last thing. Red Sox took 2 out of 3 against the Yankees, and they won again last night. So Red Sox, maybe they're not, world championship caliber yet this year. I'm not sure. Maybe, who knows? Hope springs eternal. But they were actually playing pretty well, and they're becoming a pretty interesting team. So Boston sports is pretty healthy right now. All right. Anyway, back on the civic front. So month of June is the last month of regularly scheduled Cambridge City Council meetings. Then we go into a break and for all of July. And then we'll come back for a midsummer meeting on August 5th, right? That's the traditional midsummer special. I don't know why they call it a special city council meeting, since it is regularly scheduled to be either the last Monday in July or the first Monday in August every year. Nothing special about it, really. But that'll be the meeting where a lot of stuff which is piles up in the interim will show up there, or maybe some spectacularly weird thing, a little bomb will get dropped at the last regular meeting in June, which is this coming Monday. And then we'll all just sort of sit, waiting what's going to happen until then, but we'll see. Anyway, so this month there's been some interesting things coming before our relatively well-behaved Cambridge City Council compared to the previous term or two. It's actually a much more collegial atmosphere. I think Mayor Simmons is doing a really great job, running things. Actually, have had the delightful opportunity to hang with the mayor a few times recently. One thing I'm just going to say, this is going totally off the wall thing, but for ages, Cambridge used to put out these things, these annual documents, City of Cambridge. These things are gigantic; they weigh a ton. And I have bunches of them, which have been really helpful for me, like when we were putting our documentary together on the history of the plan of leading up to the Plan E Charter. But they just abruptly stopped at some point, and I wondered, well, why did they just stop? And anyway, I was spending time with Denise Simmons a few days ago, and she loves history as much as I do. I mean, she's really, really into local history. And she actually came up with, she somehow found it. I mean, she's had it for a while. It's some of the things left by Gus Solomons, former member of the school committee. And there was a kind of more of a pamphlet level annual report. And from 1942, which would have been the very first one when we were fully into a city manager form of government. And it was really great. I was just fingering pages of that, and and actually found a statement from our very first Cambridge city manager, whose name was John Atkinson, Colonel Atkinson, as Billy Jones used to say. And he and in the sort of introductory remarks, he actually says, for ages we've been creating these big fat annual reports here, which cost in 1942 41 in the 1930s. In the Depression, it cost $4 a book to make, which was serious money then. And they only printed about 500 apparently. And it just didn't make any sense to keep doing it anymore. There were very few people were getting them and whatever. So anyway, I managed to, figure out, whatever happened to it, because it's all completely explained by Colonel Atkinson, in there. So again, I'm very grateful to Mayor Simmons for connecting me with some of these mystery solvers. It was really, really great. Anyway, oh, and she gave me cookies and a hat too. Very nice. So anyway, in the meetings of June have actually been very interesting in a number of ways. I'll start off with something that might be considered relatively minor and mundane, but on I guess it would have been June 10th, their meeting. There was a city council order asking for an update on what they call the Municipal Facilities Improvement Plan. Now, this may mean nothing to you, but the thing is that as we learned recently with this exorbitant price tag that's now associated with the main firehouse up around across from Harvard Yard, which the cost of which ballooned up to $77 million. There's been, I think, some concern because, as we've known since December, at least the city manager informed the city councilors and at least the finance committee that we are no longer made of money. And there are some important reasons why not only do we have to contain things because the tax bills are going to be jumping, but just everything's becoming more unaffordable, salary increases, contract negotiations and settlements. If we don't start, reining things in a bit, we're going to be in trouble. And we're not in trouble yet, but we could be. Anyway, the $77 million firehouse, in a certain way, I might liken it to the canary in the coal mine. It was a signal that basically said, you better look down the road a little bit for when all these other firehouses and other municipal facilities are going to need to be, fixed up, because some of them are aging. And this also includes a bunch of school buildings, I think primarily some of the elementary school buildings. And because of the way some of the ordinances we imposed upon ourselves, like Buto, in terms of becoming, net zero and whatever, the costs of actually moving forward on some of these municipal buildings actually could prove to be maybe not as exorbitant as the $77 million firehouse, but the school buildings could very much rival that or exceed that. And so basically Patty Nolan and Joan Pickett, the co-chairs of the finance committee, are looking ahead saying, Mr. Manager, tell us what's up. We need to know what's up. And I don't know whether that's going to mean retrofitting some of the ordinances so that we can keep them within budget or what. But anyway, I think, sorry to sound too nerdy about this, but I think that's actually a pretty important thing to be thinking about. Now, another thing that came up 2 weeks ago, so let's see, yesterday was the 17th, this would have been on the 10th, June 10th meeting, was a very intriguing city council order. I wasn't initially sure where exactly it was coming from, but what the order said was, I'll just read it. It was the synopsis of it was that the city manager is requested to support local news production as a public good by conducting a $100,000 per year city-backed news fund pilot for up to 3 years to be administered through an independent intermediary, which, as it turns out, they had already decided that was going to be the Cambridge Community Foundation, that will decide on funding criteria and selection of local newspapers that provide material coverage of Cambridge news. And it was filed by councilors Azim, Nolan, and Pickett. But in truth, I'm pretty sure, because I've talked to some, at least a couple of them there, that it wasn't really written by them. It was really written by the proponents of this idea. And and again, I'm not trying to in any way disparage here, but I think this is really meant to make up for the fact that Cambridge Day may be facing funding issues. So it's not, I don't think this was intended to be sort of a general news pilot program for local newspapers so much as to find a way of throwing a lifeline to one particular one. Now, I didn't know how well this was going to be received. I mean, I kind of knew that some people would say, well, I don't know about that because, the whole notion about the government funding the press, which is the fourth estate, which is supposed to be keeping the government in check, raises a lot of issues of conflict. I mean, can you trust a newspaper to hold government accountable when in fact government is actually funding them? And again, by this wouldn't be, the proposal was not that this would be sole funding so much as money to get started and then produce other methods of revenue as well. Anyway, I knew some counselors were going to say, no way, this just doesn't work. I remember some years ago when they were, I wouldn't call them exactly newspapers, but they were pretty quality newsletters that were more neighborhood specific, like Forward. It's a play on words, Area 4, Forward, WORD. That Jerry Bergman put together, or I shouldn't say he put together. There was actually a lot of really good neighborhood-based authors, and there was a lot of excellent content in that. I got to say it. But they also occasionally strayed toward the editorializing end of the spectrum. And when there was what they call a UDAG grant, I think was funding it. When that money dried up, they came cup in hand to the city and say, you should be supporting neighborhood efforts like this. And they said, no, we can't. We cannot do that. I mean, there's state law, state constitutional, the anti-aid amendment being one thing, but there was also that much more substantial or equally substantial concern about independence, and by the way, this cuts two ways. If you have government funding a newspaper or newsletter or whatever, or blog, whatever you want to call these things these days, there's not only an issue of will they hold will they bite the hand that feeds them, but there's also the flip side, which is if they write something very nice. And one of the city councilors, I think it was Mark McGovern, pointed out that if they write something nice about government and government programs and government initiatives, will people then say, well, you're only saying that because they're feeding you? So the whole question of objectivity is just thrown into a twist there. And so personally, I don't think this is the right road to go down, and again, and I'm speaking as a person who in my own niche of a way also is in this business. I mean, this very program, quite honestly, could be classified as part of that, but I wouldn't really want funding. I mean, that one's independence is somehow more valuable than just financing. And I think that there are better ways to do this anyway. But I didn't know how the votes were going to go ultimately. And ultimately, there really wasn't a vote, because what happened was it became abundantly clear that there was essentially zero support in the room. Even at least one of the sponsors was then raising questions about this. But again, remember, the sponsors didn't really write this. It was really an initiative that I came out of this little local news group thing that's assisting Cambridge Day. And I think pretty much everybody who stepped up to the microphone was associated with an entity known as the Cambridge Club, which is, sort of a do-good entity that's actually been around since the late 1800s, believe it or not. Part of me wants to say, well, why doesn't Cambridge Club basically take on the responsibility of news itself? Why not? I mean, they provide scholarships, so they're obviously bringing in money, spending it out. Why don't they just sort of make that an offshoot of themselves? But then again, people will say, well, but they don't speak for the whole community, and I think there's some valid arguments that way. Now, I could go on for days on this topic, and I won't do that here right now. I'll just mention a few other particulars about this. And I actually suggested to the proponent, by the way, Councilor Azim exercised his charter right, so that it didn't come to a vote, but it wasn't going to get more than a vote or two anyway in support. Some wanted to just down it right then and there. But it was made subject to the charter right. And then it came up on the agenda last night, June 17th, and they chose to table it with the promise that maybe some alternative of it might come back at the summer meeting in August. I don't really see how you can amend your way out of this particular thing, but I did suggest to the proponents and others that there is an important question that should be addressed, and it's really kind of amazing it hasn't been addressed to this point, which is the larger question about providing local news in an environment where the publishers of the Cambridge Chronicle have basically taken a hike. But let's turn it sideways here. If the city council or a city council committee, maybe the civic unity committee or something else, I don't know where the best home for this discussion might be, but it's a discussion that should take place. It might be an opportunity to bring the managing director local regionally from the Cambridge Chronicle and from Gannett Corporation, and essentially haul him in on the carpet and say, please explain to you why you've run away from Cambridge. And if you intend to stay away from Cambridge forevermore, and what are your long-term feelings about the Cambridge Chronicle, which, by the way, came into existence in 1846, the same year as the Cambridge became a city. So we have this kind of shared destiny, at least the way I look at it. And, you know, and again, I'm not trying to be disparaging in any way here, but the thing is that a local paper, whether it's on paper or on the web or whatever, needs to be a lot more than just focusing on controversial topics like bike lanes and affordable housing overlays, or affordable housing overlay, or or scandals or something else that's going to evoke 60 plus anonymous comments from people who are basically just wanting to use an online presence to fight each other. I mean, a real local paper has to do things like basic stuff like, how about obituaries? How about, when Cambridge Pop Warner football is in season, like what's going on? I mean, parents maybe want to see in the paper, some feature things about some of the sports. How about Cambridge Youth Soccer, Little League, you name it, right? Little things like that. The comings and goings of businesses, which I know there's a little bit of that Tom Meek will do on Cambridge Day sometimes. And by the way, there are some interesting things. Some of the writers from the history Cambridge people contribute to Cambridge Day. But a local paper just has to be a lot more than that, And figuring this question out is something we got to do. We just got to do. And whether the city officially is involved in doing this or whether it's all done completely outside the scope of the city, well, we'll have to talk about that. But the city has a vested interest in having a proper paper of record. I mean, honestly, as they say, democracy dies in darkness. And if the only thing you actually have, for public information, by the way, public information has evolved a lot anyway. There was a day that the city of Cambridge didn't put out daily press releases on 3 or 4 topics. We do that now, so there's a lot of available information if you know how to access it. So in some ways, this is really a question of orchestration more than anything else. And whether this can be done, publishing on the web or in print is actually easier now than it was back in the golden days of Cambridge Chronicle and other newspapers. So anyway, I'm going to take my traditional 5-second break here and then come back for the next half hour of Cambridge Inside Out.